Hey everyone, I'm Aaron Potratz.
And I'm Nathan Hawkins.
We are the Shrink Think
Podcast,
Podcast.
baby.
Enjoy the show.
Anyways, The Shot Caller is a really good movie. It's pretty gruesome, so it's like not for the faint of heart.
Mm-hmm.
Only recommend to you, Aaron Potratz, not other people that could be listening. Anyways, Brad's like, "Oh, that was on my list. Now that you mentioned, I gotta watch it." So I ran into him in the bathroom, and he's like, "Dude, I watched it." And I'm like, "What'd you think?" He's like, "Amazing! It was amazing!" I'm like, "Yeah, it's really good." He goes, "I love the ending scene," and he was talking about it. I won't tell you in case you get a chance to watch it. And then, like, I was leaving the bathroom, and this is going to be unsurprising for you.
That you left the bathroom?
Yeah, because I'm here. No.
Oh, right.
Right, no, but I was leaving the bathroom and had the door kind of like wide open. I was going to say something, that, because he's still in there. Mm-hmm. And then Tracy was going into the women's bathroom. And I'm like, "All right, Brad, well, you have a good time in there." Tracy looked at me like, she goes, "Hello." I said, "Well, you too." It was totally awkward, intentionally so.
Yeah,
Like so. Anyways, I just wanted to share that. I thought that little anecdote would make your heart warm.
Like a cup of tea.
Mm-hmm. I hope it flushes well.
Right. Not gonna drink tea again for a while.
Oh my gosh.
Well, shall we? You good?
Oh yeah.
Hey everyone. Nope, that's not gonna work. We can't do that. False start. Just kidding. Gotta start the clock. Hey nobody.
Oh.
Good night, nobody.
Good night.
Good night, Moon.
I just was gonna say that.
No, you weren't.
Yes, I was.
Here we go. Hey everyone, welcome to the Shrink Think Podcast. We are, as always, excited to be here with you today because we would like to have a conversation, you might say a discussion. We're not going to argue, we just want to have a conversation about, are you arguing or are you discussing? Because
that was discussing, not disgusting.
Correct.
No T's there.
There are no T's. No, we've already, if you were watching YouTube before this, no tea for a while. No tea for a while. If you have been in a relationship, then you have the understanding, the experience that you can have all kinds of different conflict with another person. And when those things come up, you need to have a conversation about the misunderstanding, the mix-up, the event, the issue, whatever it is. And I think a lot of people don't really understand that there is a difference, and really there should be a difference between having a conversation and discussing an issue versus we're arguing. I understand that sometimes things might devolve into an argument, but we want to try to encourage you as a listener to keep things in the realm of having a conversation. And of course, this is what therapy really is about when you're doing couples counseling, is that you want to create some safety and hold space for both people to be able to communicate and to be heard in a conversation so that we can discuss the issues, probably unlike what is happening at home or outside the office, to where you can actually discuss the issues, you can hear one another, where outside of the office, if you're arguing, you're not really hearing one another. So we're going to kind of put this as a topic on the table, unpack it a bit. What is arguing? What is discussing? And how do you do it?
Yeah, I'll just tell you all right now, and then the podcast can be over for that. Just kidding. Here's the 30-second version, and we're done.
Have a great day.
Yeah, so the biggest difference, I think, between the two is that with discussing, you have your own opinion, but you're open to try to, it's like, you might change it depending on what the other person says because you're talking about what you think. With arguing, you're coming from a perspective where you're trying to convince somebody else of what the right thing to do is or the right way to think about something is. And so,
or even I might say, not even just that, but you're convincing somebody maybe that what you think or what you feel, what you experienced is the right way.
as in the. the right
like
way.
this is what happened.
And this is what will happen for you exactly the same way. So one of the things that happens, kind of how I thought of this topic in the very beginning, was when there are regular arguments that occur, one of the things that will come up is when somebody will say whatever they say. Like somebody will say, "Oh, I think we should do this," and the other person will retort with something that's anything except for what that person wants to do. And the other one, that's the person starting the conversation that said that they think they should do this or whatever, will automatically be like, "Stop arguing with me." Like, bro, we didn't even, how do you even know if they are yet?
Hello.
Right. Like, you said, "I think we should do this." The other person said, "I think nope, stop arguing." You know, like, okay, well, you're probably used to arguing. The other part of it could be, like with the person I have in my mind, I think they're tired. They're like just exhausted and they wanted to state their own thing, whatever that is. And they didn't really want to like have any feedback about it. And so that's just like more energy. They used their energy to say what they wanted to do. They don't want to talk about the thing to do, even if it happens to be like a discussion, which is fine. And it's not really different than what we're talking about today, but I wanted to highlight it because it's like you can get really sensitive to opinion sharing in general, and different personalities I think react different ways. And I'm hoping that through this episode we can kind of allow you to go to maybe talk differently about it, or to somehow be more specific about what it is that you are trying to say up front, so that there's an openness there. So if you are honestly not arguing, you can somehow get that across sooner. And if you are arguing, like you are being argumentative, and maybe you don't realize it, maybe you just are sharing in your mind your opinion, but the other person feels like you're closed off to this, like you don't care at all what I have to say next, that we can help you to be more open in your communication based on the intention that you have, so that you're kind of aware of like your typical impact.
Yeah, so you're mentioning something I think that is really important that you want to aim for in having a conversation or discussing an issue with somebody else. You want to have some openness to another point of view, openness to a different experience, and just openness to what the other person is saying. And that's a sort of check yourself sort of a situation where I would say internally I try to recommend to people to be in a posture of curiosity. If you can be curious, like first of all being open, like okay, we're going to have a conversation and it's not just me telling you something and you understanding, even if maybe I was the one that was hurt or actually wronged and I'm trying to convey to you what had happened, like that you hurt me or wronged me. I still need to maintain some openness. This isn't just a you hurt me, you wronged me, like pay for it or say you're sorry kind of a thing, because that can easily turn into an argument. Because the other person had an experience where maybe they didn't intend on hurting me or wronging me, but it happened, and it's important for both of us that their perspective and their intention is actually heard. Because in my mind, I might be thinking like, oh, you did this thing and it hurt me, how could you? But if the other person was like, wow, I really had no idea, or like, I just thought this other thing was going on and I'm so sorry, I feel bad. That's important, because me, as the person that was wronged or hurt in this issue, in order to be restored, I need to know that you actually still care about me and you didn't mean to do that. It was not your intention. And I need to hold that in my mind, so that openness and curiosity to the other person's point of view, I think and their experience is really, really important to having a conversation.
Yeah, the other thing that happens in curiosity, we haven't talked about this for a while, so I'm going to, some of you longtime listeners are going to know this already, but curiosity only happens in the brain and the neocortex. And the reason why that's kind of cool and important is that what doesn't happen in the neocortex is a bunch of other automatic, unconscious types of things. Like the things that maybe you've always been afraid of the way somebody, like because of some historical thing, you've been afraid of something in a certain way. And if you're not in the neocortex, you are going to have that in your bag while you're talking. But in the neocortex, you are in real time, you're present, you are thinking currently. It just happens. So the cool kind of thing is, if you are intentionally curious, it will help your brain to actually get in the space that you need to be in order to actually have more of an in-depth conversation that is malleable, that's changeable.
And then kind of along with that, when you are curious, you will tend to ask more questions. You'll tend to kind of follow up on things. Your responses probably will not be as quick or as maybe as sharp or as one-sided. So like these are other sort of elements, markers maybe of a discussion versus arguing. Arguments tend to be faster, and tend to be sharper in the sense that your position, it's kind of like that one person puts their hand out there and the other person, maybe if you're trying to convince, they put their hand on top, right? And it's like, no, my point of view or what I'm trying to say, and the other person pulls their hand out from the bottom and like, me, and it's kind of like the more you do that, the harder that you might need to like sort of forcefully put your opinion out there. But when you're just having a conversation and you're curious, there is space for all of it. There's space for what did you think and why, where were you coming from, and what's that all about for you, and here's what I was thinking, and here's what I need, those kinds of things. So when you're having a discussion, there's like this openness to understanding. And then this kind of gets to me, another one of those components is that within arguing, you tend to focus on the issues, which is like the content. It's like and it's most of the time, it's not about the toothbrush. It's not about the toilet paper going this way. It's not about the whatever.
Although we know it should go over the top.
Of course, everybody who's anybody knows that is the correct way.
And don't squeeze the toothpaste from the middle.
Correct. Unless it's a brand new tube, then you can do whatever you want, right? Because there's so much of it.
Only
there.
For about 4 usages.
It's not about that issue, right? That's not what it's about. It's about, in a relationship, it's about the relationship. It's about the two of you, the two people. So even if that was the issue that happened, it's really more about how did you experience it, or how did it impact you? How did I impact you? So if you're having a conversation and you're discussing something, you're not just wanting to know what happened, you're also wanting to know what happened for you. How did you experience this? What were you feeling? What were you thinking? How did I impact you, and how did that shape your response to me?
Yeah, and one of the things about this, when it comes to curiosity, I want to just highlight, curiosity does not have an agenda. If it did have an agenda, I guess the agenda would be understanding. Because really, what happens, you're a sharp person. I mean, obviously, I listen to this podcast, boom, shakalaka. But you intuitively know when somebody has an agenda, right? They are not really asking questions because they're trying to understand what you're saying. They're almost trying to set you up for what their argument is.
And it's kind of like you run into the guardrails, like you're trying to just explore it or say something, and you run into like some boundary lines or guardrails, and it's kind of frustrating because you're like, I didn't really mean to be boxed in like this. Can I just get my point across?
Right. I think, I've 4 or 5 different things going on in my mind right now. I think one of the things that you can do maybe if you're a person, for example, that has an actual strong opinion on something, and then the other person, and it's kind of, I guess my thought with that is that maybe it's kind of known that you do, like you kind of think a certain way about something. One good example could be even a role that you're in. Like I get these questions, I'm sure Aaron does, because somebody has something that they want to ask or they want to say, and they also know that we're therapists, right? So they automatically think, oh, you probably have an opinion on this, whatever this thing is. And you, meaning me, let's just say somebody else is asking me what I think about something, and then they know I probably do actually have a longer opinion. I would try to intentionally, if I was saying something back to the person, I'd say, okay, so I'm just trying to understand where you're coming from. I have already thought about some of this stuff. You probably guessed that, but how are you accounting for this, whatever this is? So my point of bringing this up is, if you're kind of known like that, a good question to come back with is, how are you accounting for this, or have you thought about this, or have you considered this? Because it's honoring the fact that the person probably already knows you have a way of thinking about it. But what you're also saying is, I would love to hear how it is that you put this together. And if the person's like, oh, I really didn't think about that, well, that's fine. They can think about that now, or ask a question or whatever. Or if they have, and that's different, it's an opportunity for me in this case to be like, oh yeah, well, I didn't actually think about that. I didn't, because it's starting from more of an open place, and we're with the idea that you're actually going to have a dialogue. And that's kind of one of the things we started with the podcast of how to navigate this depending on your position. The other component to this stuff that I wanted to say that I thought we probably should honor this is arguing is actually not bad in general. Like, it's not like it's an evil bad thing. I think when you have an actual argument, though, with another, like, one-on-one type of scenario, it kind of needs to get adjudicated. You really kind of need a third party to speak into it.
I think the thing that makes arguing bad is how it's being done. Like, if there's yelling, name calling, put downs, interrupting, like those kind of process oriented things within arguing, that's what makes it bad. But if we're arguing about something and we're like really wrestling with it, that can be a good and helpful, sometimes even a necessary thing, because the whole point of all of this relationship, having a conversation, working through something, is to understand each other better and to get to a place of deeper connection and intimacy.
Yeah, I think here's maybe a short, good example. If you have a strong opinion on something, and you really are not really willing to change it, you've thought about it a lot, and then you're in an argument with your partner, what I would suggest is that you switch to the tact of saying, let me make sure that I understand your argument, and then reframe it as if you are the person. Just put it all the way out there. And then if your partner's like, yeah, no, that's it. Yeah, that's it. So why don't you agree with me?
And my hope, if you're that person that's doing that, like, you can make this your aim to try, and this happens in debates, and I think this is actually a really good thing, is sometimes when you're going into a debate, you actually have to take the position of your opponent and argue their position. My goal, if you're the person that's doing this, is to try to state their argument better than they did. As good or better than they did, so they're like, wow, like, you really get it. That's exactly it. And there's even a piece of that you nailed that I hadn't even thought of, but that's really important to me.
Right. And you can then, before you get all tactician about this, because we're not trying to teach you how to be like this tactical winning human,
right.
Like, ask the other person, would you mind restating mine, just so that I understand, like, if we're on the same page, that you're tracking what I'm saying. And then you can kind of correct it or whatever, that kind of thing. I think it will settle things down. It feels a little cumbersome. You probably won't want to do that. But what it does is it denotes respect to the other person. And then what you can say is, after that's all out there, first of all, there's no other reason to talk about it at that point, really. But what you can do is say, okay, so in my opinion, what your argument does not account for X. Mm-hmm. And it bothers me. That's why I can't hold it. And then the other person might say something like, okay, and I don't care about X, so I'm fine holding mine. Like, okay, well, we're just going to disagree. We are comfortable with what's going on, and then the end.
Yeah, so there are two things that you're also saying that are important in this process: care and, like, cooperation. So care would be in that process. It's like you're demonstrating care for one another, right? By holding space for understanding what the other person is thinking, feeling, needing, why they're doing what they're doing. You're demonstrating, like, I care about you, and I care about your point of view. I care about the things that you care about, and I want to make sure that you feel cared about in this process. While we're having the conversation, I want you to know that I care about you, and vice versa. You're hoping that, you're getting that same care in return, and that's, I think, again, hallmarks of a good discussion. And then along with that, if you get to that point where, okay, I understand your perspective, you understand mine, even if it's a disagreement, like you just said, going into cooperation, which is like, okay, well, what are we going to do about this? Or how can we proceed? Right? When you're arguing, it's like one side against the other. But a discussion is like the two of us against this issue. Like, we're on the same team, we're on the same side, trying to pursue moving forward together, and we don't yet know together how to do that with this disagreement. So, like, well, how should we handle that? What do you need? What do I need? How can we do this so that we're both okay with it?
Right, and the reality is, when you move to that direction, some of what is in your argument, like, meaning some of the foundation of your opinion, probably doesn't apply to where you need to go. Like, in the scenario of, like, you're arguing about something, and then you're like, okay, well, now what are we going to do? Whatever the what are we going to do thing, some of your foundational reasons for having your opinion probably don't apply, and that's I think where you start to compromise, is to go, okay, well, I guess this part doesn't really matter that much.
Yeah, and this is where care comes into play, because let's say you've got some sort of argument, something that is important to you, and we're trying to move forward together, and like I really can't make any concessions, or I can't really make any compromises for you. So it's like, well, I mean, I guess this just is going to be what it is, which, by the way, John and Julie Gottman, the Gottmans, who are very famous for their Love Lab up in Seattle at the University of Washington, a lot of research on this. They state that, at least in, this can apply to coworkers and friends arguing, discussing, but it also applies to partnerships and marriages and things like that. So they talk about having solvable and unsolvable problems. In this case, it might be more of an unsolvable problem where it's like, well, I mean, it just is, like your brother is just going to be in our life, and like there's nothing I can do about it. So like, okay. But then it's like, how do we move forward together, and how can I care about you, or how can I get care from you, even though this obstacle is going to be in the way that we disagree on? How can we still demonstrate care for one another, even though that thing is happening?
Yeah, one of the things that's true in argument is that the bad argument, the bad way to do it is you're really only caring about yourself. You're caring about that your opinion's heard, and that you win, and that you're right. And we'll often say in counseling, would you rather have a relationship, or would you rather be right? And it can come down on that side for that. One of the things to consider as we close and turn for home here is that what you really need to keep in mind when you're trying to communicate your opinion is that you actually do care about the other person, like Aaron's talking about, and that they actually do care about you, or else you wouldn't even be having this conversation. Right. And if you can keep it in mind that, like, okay, you can even say to yourself, I don't hang out with dumb people. I wouldn't do that. I need to stay open to what this other intelligent person, because I only hang out with smart people, has to say about this. Like I'm obviously joking around, but let's be real. Like you probably do hang out with people that you value them as a human, right? You have to remember that when you are having this conversation.
And probably even state that, maybe not directly, but add positives like, hey, that's a really good point of view, or like, oh, I didn't know that about you, or like, hey, I really want to hear what you have to say, that's important to me. Those kinds of things go a long way in a discussion.
Right. And the other side of it too is if you feel like the person is, because we talked about kind of the both sides of solution here, if you feel that the person is coming on really strong, just let them know, like, okay, I'm not sure if you're open to talk about this. You sound as you're talking in a very closed way. Where are you at with this? I mean, maybe you just want to share your opinion, in which case I'm not going to argue it. I'll just...
Or even something like, hey, like you're coming on really strong. Like I see that you feel really passionate about this. Mm-hmm. I also have some thoughts and feelings. Are you open to hearing mine?
Right. Yep. And if the person's honest in that situation and they don't, then now you know, and you can just kind of detach a little bit and maybe talk later if you want, type of a thing. Yeah. So
hopefully this conversation, though, was helpful in highlighting, what this looks like, what the differences are, so that if you're out there and maybe you've got some of these relationships that are happening, you can have a better sense of which one you might land in, and maybe an idea of what you need to do differently in order to get to the healthier conversational discussion zone that we're encouraging.
So keep curious out there. Have a great day.
Bada boom, bada bing, you know what I mean?
Bada boom. Well, that was obviously amazing, and that's my final opinion.
I mean, we are smart people with a smart audience. So.
Yeah. If you don't share that opinion and you're in the audience, stay in the audience, and we'll change your opinion over time.
Without arguing.
Without arguing.
There will be no argument.
Oh my god.
Because you have none. We win. We win. You found it.